I'm Matthew Holt. I am one of the co-chairs of Catalyst at Health 2.0. You can also see on the screen with me my colleague Elizabeth Brown, who is the program manager at Catalyst Health. And I will introduce Paul and Girish in a second. This is we've been looking forward to this for a long time. This is the presentation of our survey on the state of digital health, which is it's been quite a year and a bit for digital health, and this is some data we've collected over the last few months. I'm really looking forward to seeing how it goes. So, welcome to the results. Here's what we're going to do today. This is the welcome part. I guess you need a welcome on an agenda. I'll tell you who we have. Then I'm going to introduce Girish Ramachandra and Paul Johnson, who are from Wipfli, who are the folks who came up with the idea for doing this survey and worked with us on it and sponsored the survey. We're going to do a little bit about, they're going to talk a little bit about what Wipfli does. We have a little bit of background about how we got here. And then the main part of this will be a dive into the key findings of the survey. There's a lot in the survey. We can't possibly tell you everything. We will have more data coming out in the future, but this is the key findings will be today. And then we're going to have a panel talking about the results with a venture capitalist, a lawyer, and a couple of digital health CEOs. So we're really looking forward to that. And then right at the end, there was one of the prizes for being part of the survey, for taking the survey, was to get advertising, free advertising, which is worth something, on the healthcare blog, which I also own. And we'll do a live draw, which I hope will work, with some random numbers to figure out who are the two people who get those ads for a year. All right. So with that, let's kick off. I want to introduce Paul Johnson and Girish Ramachandra. They are from Wipfli, and they're going to tell you a little bit about what they do.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you, Catalyst, for doing this survey. And a little bit about Wipfli. My name is Girish Ramachandra, and I lead the National Tech Industry Practice at Wipfli. And we help growing tech companies cross the chasm and be the market leader. And maybe we can go to the next slide and we talk a minute or two about how we do that. So managing the life cycle of any startup is critical to long-term sustainable growth for any startup, especially during the growth stage and crossing that chasm, if you have read Jeffrey Moore. And bringing in expertise at the right moment in that particular stage of the life cycle produces breakthrough results that you go from an early stage to a mature stage and manage that cross the chasm in the growth stage. But can we go to the next slide? And very few health tech startups that we know of can successfully break through the traps of crossing the chasm, because the tyranny of the urgent always takes precedence over the pain of the fix. And founders always are worried about the urgent matters and often blindsided about what is important and how do we fix the things for the longer term. Next slide. And to be one of the market leaders in your space and remain a market leader is the ultimate business objective, and that is where you innovate the most. That is where you optimize for the maximization of profit and growth. It is the place where every company is at its best and all the traps of crossing the chasm have been negotiated. Next slide. So our business solutions will help you reach and stay the market leader, and that's what we do in our day-to-day work with every tech company. We help companies cross the chasm and be the market leader. We'll go to the next slide. And these are some of the services that we offer, but very importantly, we are relentlessly focused on your opportunities. And we approach everything we do with genuine curiosity, because unless we learn from the market, from the entrepreneurs, we cannot bring in the deep knowledge or resources that we have. So we are driven to understand your business as deeply as you do through unique combination of entrepreneurial passion, industry knowledge, and functional skills. So many of our team members have been entrepreneurs before themselves, And we are very committed to helping startups succeed and grow with compelling and powerful insights and our resources and solutions. And our team fluidly integrate our services with yours. And as you've seen in the previous slide, those are some of our services. So I'll let Paul talk a little bit about our services.
Thanks, Girish. And good day, everyone. Just a little bit about myself. Girish is the overall technology industry, national industry leader at Wipfli. And so my role is really working closely with him, and I'm the national health tech practice leader. And so I've been with the firm for about 10 years. Over most of my career, I've spent that in and around the healthcare industry in both the payer and provider markets, and really helping organizations with their compliance needs, or in the health tech space, really helping them with a variety of different needs. As you can imagine, there, as you're starting to grow, there's a lot of areas that are challenging and where help is necessary. So a little bit about our health tech practice. We tailor our services really to help folks through that early stage up through their rapid growth, and even at the stage where they're either hit a maturity level or are looking to exit the business, either through a merger or some other type of transition. So we can help all the way along there. We not only help the organization itself, but the individual founders as well. We have a Wipfli financial advisors team as well that can help them with a lot of the key issues as on a personal basis that are important to founders. So this slide really talks about some of our key services. The strategic advisory services. In there, we're talking about things like market and pricing strategies, funding options, exploring those with the organization, technology and system architecture, and focusing on scalability and scaling up, and then change management plans as well, which is vitally important. From a financial accounting solutions perspective, preparing for that first financial audit or doing a financial review, helping organizations move from things like QuickBooks to enterprise financial systems, dealing with revenue recognition issues, and then back office accounting functions are other services that we provide, such as accounts payable, AR, payroll, things like that. Next slide. A couple other areas, as you can imagine, as a CPA firm, tax. So R&D tax credits and angel investment credits are relevant to the technology industry. We also help with the corporate and personal financial, tax returns as well. And then finally, another key area is cybersecurity and compliance. So an area that I spent a lot of time in, helping organizations with compliance to regulations like HIPAA, GDPR, CCPA. If they have a requirement for certifications or third-party audits, things like HITRUST, SOC 2 audits, ISO 27001 or 27701 compliance. And then from a cybersecurity perspective, network and application pen testing, or overall, cybersecurity resiliency reviews to help organizations understand how good they are in terms of warding off those attacks that happen. And then, finally, I just wanted to say a couple words, and I'll turn it back over to Matthew. Why did we want to sponsor this survey? Well, we wanted to learn more about the impact of the pandemic on the digital health market, and share those results back with the industry. We also wanted to learn more about the health tech companies' needs and challenges going forward. And our goal is really to kind of continue to work on our robust service offering to help better align with the industry and help them grow. So, if you're interested in learning more about what we do, our contact information is here. Feel free to reach out to Girish or myself, and we'd love to have a conversation with you. So we want to thank you all for attending the webinar today. I'll turn it over to Matthew, and we'll go over the next steps here. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Paul, Girish, thanks a lot. I mean, I think one of the things I enjoyed getting to know Paul a little bit is that when they came to us and said, hey, we're interested in learning more about the digital health marketplace, I said, well, you just want to learn about what they're doing for accounting and how they're doing cybersecurity. And they actually said, no, we want to know rather more than that. Now, they did want to know about that, and there's a ton of data that we have about that. We'll give you a little taste of it. We know a lot about the operations now, about how this works, but in general, this survey is looking deeply into the notes of what's actually happening in terms of the overall state of digital health and how digital health companies are operating. Okay, so I'm going to co-present this with Elizabeth Brown, who's a program manager at Health 2.0, and we're really going to show you this. Now, this survey was open from roughly Thanksgiving, late November or December, through the middle of March, and we spent a lot of time and effort getting people to take the survey. And as has been noted by a couple of people, in fact, one of them on the panel today, this survey was pretty invasive. We asked for a lot of very detailed, semi-secret information. This information is not being shared with Wipfli. Identities are not being shared. We're not sharing that information beyond the essentially Elizabeth and myself within Catalyst. However, we have used all that information and aggregate data to, I think, get to a point where I don't think I've ever seen a survey, and I've been doing digital health for a long time, as you know, I don't think I've ever seen a survey that's got this level of detail in it. You'll get a sense of some of that today. So Elizabeth, why don't you kick off with the overall demographics?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Brown. I'm the program manager with Catalyst. So we had a ton of people take this survey, 335 respondents, including 182 different digital health companies. A big portion of the respondents were digital health companies, 60%. And then we also had some publicly traded digital health companies, some subsidiaries of larger tech corporations, some life science organizations, investors, consultants, and some other people as well.
Yeah, they also included some patient advocates and some other nonprofit organizations. We were focused, obviously, mostly on the digital health companies.
So here we're focusing more specifically on the digital health companies. Of the digital health companies that were involved, most of them were small, between 0 to 19 or so full-time employees. That covered about half of the companies. And then we had a pretty even distribution between the larger size companies as well.
So one of the things we were focused on is that how do you think about this? The world of digital health companies, as you might guess from this is, we think, relatively representative. There's probably somewhere in the order of 10 to 15,000 digital health companies across the globe. There's probably some in the order of 6,000 to 8,000, maybe a few more in the US. It's very hard to track that. Catalyst at Health 2.0 has a database called Source Database, which looks into that. But one of the ways to think about it is what stage are these companies in? And we end up with these 5 stages. And here are our 5 stages we talked about. We do a fair amount of this data will be cross-referenced in these 5 stages, including the very early stage product development. You probably haven't actually got a product out on the market yet. You're still building a product. And those companies tend to be very small. That's the sort of, less than 5 employees, majority of them. Maybe you've got a live product and you just get going with your first few customers, and then you're likely to grow a little bit. It's 0 to 5 employees, but maybe you're up to 20 employees for those ones. Just beginning to scale, this is where things get very interesting. Obviously, now you're starting to have more employees between sort of 20 and 50, between 5 and 50 for most of these companies. And then finally, the bigger groups are those who are actively scaling, who are probably now, these are the ones who are starting to raise large amounts of money, starting to bring on a lot more employees. You see many more of these who've got either more than 100 employees or more than 250. And finally, the group, though we didn't have too many of these, but some of the publicly traded ones and a few others, who are now fairly mature and have got plenty of customers in the market. And again, obviously, they tend to be somewhat larger. Elizabeth, can you talk a bit about the customers?
Sure. So we asked a couple questions about primary target customers, different products. And first, we looked at the target customers, and we found that there was a lot of overlap between companies and the customers they were targeting. So we saw a lot of companies, 62% targeting providers, 57% targeting health plans and payers. And of the companies that said they were targeting consumers, 33% said they were targeting consumers. Half of those also were targeting employers. And then of those that were targeting employers, that 34%, 75% were also targeting payers. So there was a lot of different overlap between the different kind of segments of the market. And then we saw some overlap, a little less so than you would see in the customer base in terms of the kind of products and service offerings that companies had. Most companies, 86% were selling, are selling software, and then 55% are selling, providing services. And then interestingly, of the companies who said they were making hardware, that 14%, all of them are also making software. And then of those that are making software, 54% are also providing services. So you see a lot of software, and then you see software was kind of the primary market here, I think. What do you think, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me the question is how many more are going to be adding services on. That's obviously where a lot of the bigger companies are starting to head. All right, so let's get into some of the sort of nitty gritty here of the real impact of where are they with revenue and what's the impact of COVID. A lot of complexity in this slide. I'm going to show you this, and then I'm going to break it down. So really at the bottom, these are the companies who, one of the areas which are in the blue here, these are the companies who are pre-revenue, not making any revenue. And we asked it by year, 2019, 2020, don't forget this was done right at the end of 2020 and 2021. So you can see over time, people either believed or forecast, companies believe or forecast that many fewer of them believe there will be pre-revenue. And if you look by 2021, which is this current year, many more believe that they're going to be either making up to 500,000. This is the group between 500,000 and 2 million. This is the group between 2 and 5. And this is the group making 5 to 10. At the top here, this is 30 million plus, which is a pretty significant number for any digital health company. And in fact, you're seeing some companies start to prepare to go public at that level. And obviously that includes some of the public companies. What we did is that, we said, okay, in general, the revenues are pretty low now, but there's great expectations. Where is that expectation really going to grow? Now, this is between 2019 and 2021, broken down by those different those different categories again. So what you can see here is that the companies who are just beginning to scale are the ones where you see a more significant expectations of growth. So right now, if the ones who are just beginning to scale back in 2019, the vast majority of them here were making less than 2 million. But they believe that by the end of this year, the vast majority of them will be making 2 million and plenty more. And of course, when you're actively scaling adding customers, the same thing is true. You can see that, while a significant chunk of them were only making less than 2 million, something in the order of 30%, that number is going to be very small by 2021. And many of them believe, more than half believe, nearly half believe they're going to be making over 30 million. You can see the mature companies too are growing, but obviously not quite as fast. So that kind of says what you expect. There is a fair amount of optimism, but this will be reflected throughout the presentation. Those who are in the groups who are just beginning to scale or actively scaling really benefited through COVID and will continue to benefit. Those who were earlier stage are struggling a bit more. Okay. Having said that, only 5% of customers said that revenue was actually going to dramatically fallen. And this is compared to what they were expecting. So we also asked a series of questions saying, okay, how did you do compared to your plan, or how did you do compared to your expectations? And what you can see is that 41% of companies said that compared to what they were expecting, their revenue actually increased. And most of the rest said it stayed about the same. And 12% said it increased dramatically. And there's a key here. What do we mean by that? Dramatic is 50% more than your plan or you're expecting. Now, don't forget, most of these digital health companies believe that they're going to go to the moon anyway, and they tend to have those very aggressive up to the right curves we've all seen in those charts. So a significant number of them beat that out already. So either 50% above or at least 15% above plan, and the significant stayed the same. And then when you break this down by the companies, and we've done this this is the total number of companies, but the percentage within each number within those categories. You can see that over here, 12% thought their revenue was going to increase dramatically. But if you are either actively scaling or mature in the market, a significant number, 17%, even 20% of the mature companies who actually already had an offering in the market felt that they were going to be well above plan. Whereas, of course, if you're just getting going, you're less likely to be increasing so fast. So we took the similar view on how companies were seeing their technologies, their services, and their technology being used, and we looked a little bit about their new product development. So whereas about 40% said that their revenue increased above expectational plan, 65%, so the vast majority of all companies we surveyed, said that the usage of their products or services increased more than they're expecting since the start of COVID. So here's those numbers again. About 15% said increased dramatically, but about 50% said it was more than 15% above what they were expecting. So again, that's still 65%. Again, only a very few said that it was a little bit less, and only a very small number said it dramatically fallen below what they'd expected. Again, here's this broken down by those categories. And again, don't forget, increased dramatically was 15% overall. Now, if you're an early stage product company, you're not very likely to have dramatic increase because you can't handle it. But you'll see that those beginning to scale, or those who are actively scaling, saw really dramatic increases above plan. I think it's not just, they were going up the way they expected to go up, they were expecting to go anyway. This is even better than that. And those who are actually in the market, nearly a quarter of them, even the ones found that they saw some significant increase in how their product was used. We did, as Elizabeth noted, survey some other folks as well, and we've got a couple of slides about that. So this is looking at investors. There weren't very many of them. We only had a total of 13 investors. We weren't really targeting them, but some of them, broke it into the survey anyway. And we had a number of people we've called users, who tend to be payers, providers, pharma companies, and consultants working with those. So we phrased some questions around them, asking them, how it was going for them. And the answer here is that all the investors who surveyed thought that the digital health usage digital health products by their portfolio companies' products was increasing dramatically, or increased slightly. Nobody thought it was going down. Not quite so gung ho were the digital health users. Many of them, again, they did see a lot of dramatic increase, but they said it only most of them said it increased slightly or stayed about the same. Then we asked some questions about staffing, and this is overall. Again, this is again compared to plan. Yeah, about 29% said that they added more staff than planned, whereas a decent about nearly half said hiring plans stayed the same. Compared to, again, sorry, this is the digital health companies, not the hospitals or the providers. A significant amount, though, did hire fewer than expected. You remember back in March, people were thinking that this was a nuclear winter coming, and that things were going to be battened down, and things were going to be very rough. And a few did actually lay off staff. But of course, you'd expect that to some extent. Things do go wrong in startups, no matter how good the market is. But I think this shows that the sector as a whole increased hiring quite aggressively. If you look at it again, it's the companies who are already beginning to scale, or who are actively scaling, in fact, even the ones mature in the market, who added more than who are on average adding more staff than planned compared to the others, right? So overall, it was 29% adding more staff than planned, but if you're just beginning to scale, it was 31%, or if you're actively scaling, it was 37%. So the scaling and those mature companies were the ones benefiting the most from COVID and beating up the most. One more thing is, and this is pretty much across the board, basically everybody added new products and services during COVID. 66% did that, and 3% completely pivoted the focus of their company. This isn't that surprising. Everybody's seen this. All of virtually everyone had a COVID-related product or service that came on board. In fact, we started what's now our source database COVID edition, which you can find if you're following along. We'll put it in the chat. Perhaps we can put in the chat, which is blue.catalyst.health. We have a database of companies that we found that added COVID-specific products. There's a whole video of that we did with the Robert Johnson Foundation, available on the Catalyst.health website. We're not surprised that a lot of people added this, and we started tracking this early on, even in March and April last year. But a significant number of new product offerings and service offerings. And again, these are more likely to be in those companies who are actively scaling, already mature in the market, because they can add another product relatively easily. But virtually everyone was doing it. Even the early stage product development companies were adding new products, and more than half of them were doing that. So a lot more products coming on since the start of 2019. Here's this one's a little complicated to read, but this is, again, looking at our investors and comparing them to the sort of digital health users. This is what did the investors believe was going on at the end customers. In other words, with the group below, the investors, 77% believed that they were starting to use these new products or services. Whereas when you ask the digital health users themselves or the consultants working with them, only 47% thought they were using that. And in fact, if you go back to the companies, only 27% thought that they were using. Sorry, only 27% thought that they were going to be using the same products. No investors believed that the customers were just using the same amount, whereas 20% of the customers said they were using this. They were 33%, wrong one, were using the same product and service offering at the same rate. So the investors, as you can probably imagine, a little bit more gung-ho than the actual customers. But nonetheless, the direction is pretty clear. A lot more products and services starting to be, new ones starting to be used, and a significant number of using the same digital health product or service at a much higher rate. Okay, I'll toss this back to Elizabeth for a second. This is some important stuff about some brief data with a lot more about regulation, data security, and other stuff, and other information. And this is, I think, in light of the pipeline attack and the attack on Scripps Digital Health, pretty important.
Yes, so we asked a few questions in the survey about awareness of federal and state regulations and international regulations and kind of level of security compliance and certifications. And what we found is, to start with the regulatory environment, there's a fair number of companies, could stand to use a little more help in terms of gaining awareness and knowledge about the regulations. Over 30% have, maximum a fair level of understanding about it, and only 28% have dedicated in-house expertise related to regulations. And then when you look more closely at by company stage, you can see that really the earlier stage companies are the ones that need a little more help, and are least aware and have the least amount of knowledge about regulations. Over 50%, actually over 60% of early stage companies have some are starting to get educated about it or have a fair to medium level of understanding about it. And then once you look at the mature companies, you don't see anyone with a fair to medium level of understanding. So it's definitely seems to be something that comes with establishment in the industry. That said, though, despite the kind of shaky level of understanding, more than 70% of companies have actually needed some form of security certification, and we only 27% have it had either not come up or some sort of other kind of situation with it. So there is that need for that certification or documentation. But as we're seeing, there's that kind of disconnect between knowledge and actually having it. And then we also see only 25% of companies have actually completed the certification.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that there are people in the process of doing it. They're all being asked many questions, but they haven't really got very far in how much they've done. You'd expect that with smaller level companies, but I think it's going to be a sort of cost of doing business that more and more people are going to be asked about. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about what happened, with sort of the new COVID normal, or the new normal they're calling it. And here's the sort of the some of the sort of basics about what happened next. Surprisingly enough, a lot of people like this idea, and a lot of companies like this idea of working from home. Nearly 70% thought it was positive overall. Here are a few of the questions we asked, and you can answer multiple questions in this one. When you went to work from home, was it smooth sailing? Nearly half said it was smooth sailing. Nearly 40% said only minor adaptations were needed. Only 18% said it was a significant change. 24%, twice as many organizations, companies thought that working from home improved productivity compared to 12% that said reduced productivity. So that's pretty interesting. So perhaps maybe people will be staying at home and working home from now on, and maybe we'll pick that up with in the panel discussion. All right. Here's kind of the big finding of the whole survey, right? Is that how is this going to be for your business overall? 87% of digital health companies thought that COVID-19, despite all the problems and the issues we've had this year, was going to be positive for their business. And nobody we surveyed believes that it's going to be a long-term problem for their business. So here's the actual data. 40% of digital health companies believed that COVID was going to dramatically improve their business prospects. And 47% said, yeah, there's going to be some hiccups, some problems, but it's going to be net positive. And only a few thought it to be neutral or be a problem just for the short term. As I said, nobody thought it was going to be a long-term problem. So compare digital health to, I don't know, cruise lines, airlines, restaurants. Half the economy has done really poorly, and you can see that we're in some ways in a privileged sector. We should be, thankful for that. Again, looking at this by different company size, actually wasn't a great deal of variation. But again, the companies who were just beginning to scale or actively scaling in the market are the ones who felt that it was going to be dramatically improving their business prospects a little bit more than the 40% average. If you're already in the market, it was more of a mixed picture, but overall, it was still net positive. Having said that, we asked people about sales cycles, which you assumed if they think things are going to get better, sales cycles will be going down. But only a minority, 25%, said that they'd seen their sales cycles go down. About a third, a little under a third, said it was going to stay the same. Nearly, 44%, on the way to nearly half, said the sales cycles picked up. Now, a lot of those were selling to providers and other areas who were having a tougher time. But given the sort of feeding frenzy in the funding market, you might expect that it would actually have been rather better than that. So if you look at that compared to expectations, again, if you were either a mature company in the market, perhaps selling into hospitals with already a sort of a mature client base, your sales cycles definitely picked up. If you were just getting into the market with your live product with the first few customers, again, a lot of people saw longer sales cycles there. Less relevant for the early stage product companies who really didn't have, were just getting going. If you were just beginning to scale, or if you're actively scaling, certainly if you're actively scaling, it was a little bit better. And in fact, some of those companies saw shorter sales cycles. All right. So we're going to wrap with some questions and some data about funding, and then we'll go to our panel discussion. First off, there are massive funding rounds. You've all seen the rounds. Jess DeMaster and I report on them every week in Health in 2.0. Our little show where we go through funding rounds, and seems to be $100 million every day from Tiger Global. You've got to remember, for most digital health companies, that's not reality. The vast majority of them have raised less than 2 million, or less than 5 million, and most have raised less than 2.5. About a quarter that we looked up have only raised 25%. So the average raise of the companies we surveyed was 40 million, but the median is back in this range, right? It's only just over. It's in this group. It's only in 3.9. Who did they raise money from? Well, this is relatively obvious. About 33% hadn't raised any funding. 40 hadn't raised external funding. This was. Some of them had raised money from their own resources. About nearly a half had raised from VC funds, and nearly half had raised from angels. And fairly obvious, but if you'd raised VC funding, about half of those had also raised money from angels along the way. And again, if by the time you're getting to corporate funding, most of those, 70%, has also got a VC funding, indicating that the corporates were coming into the round. So what did the digital health companies say about the investment climate? Well, 62% said it had got much better compared to what they'd experienced before COVID. So go back to March when people were talking about funding shutting down and a new recession and hunkering down for the long term. Did not come true at all. That wasn't what happened. Thanks to that big stimulus bill and thanks to the change to virtual care, the market certainly improved. Again, and this is relatively obvious when you think about it, it improved the most for people who are actively scaling. The people who are already scaling found it very easy, found it much, much easier to raise money. It was good for everybody, but it wasn't so great for the early stage product folks, and even for those just beginning to scale. But if you're actively scaling or you're a mature company in the market of products, you found that the investment climate for your organization had got much better. And here are some quotes from some more early stage digital health companies. For example, we're in a white hot space, but the venture market and investing companies under 3 million in revenue are sidelining new investments in favor of retaining capital to ensure existing investments get through COVID. Investors were interested in companies that already vetted and or doubled down on the existing investments. And last one, it's a catch-22. There's more interest, but they want to write larger checks than we need. I think a lot of digital health companies are in that boat. Now, we've talked to users. Remember, this is the end users, the payers, providers, consultants, and most of them also felt that the climate for digital health had got better, and they had some interesting things to say, including that COVID had brought about greater realization of the role of digital health in providing viable solutions among the general public and the healthcare industry as a whole. In other words, yes, all that stuff you heard about 5 years of progress being crammed into 1 year is probably true. Someone said it looked becoming a gold rush, unlike anything they'd seen since the crazy EMR days of 2008 to 10. And then finally, and I think we all know this is true, telehealth got the validation and the uptake that it's been waiting for. I might add, been waiting for a long time. As you might guess, 100% every investor we talked to thought the investment climate had improved since the start of COVID-19. And almost all of them, other than one, I won't find out who that one is, said that valuations have gone up a lot, and they clearly have done as well. Couple of quotes from investors. I won't read all of these, but I thought one interesting one is the middle one, which is suggesting that COVID pushed adoption of digital health tools ahead by a number of years, and some companies grew just because of COVID and because of changing consumer and enterprise behavior. But this was already starting to see adoption for many, and they simply saw this path accelerated. So maybe COVID wasn't just the fact that maybe it was just accelerating something that was already starting to happen. So I'll leave these quotes up there for a second to look. But, there was some evidence that hospitals are busy and interactions with them went from long to extremely long, which backed up some of those sales cycles. One other late part is that a lot of people said that investors got to decisions more quickly. We didn't find that. Zero of the investors we talked to said that. And there was some idea that end users increased their decision time, but almost all of them said they didn't change that or actually increase their decision time. It suggests that that length of time is going to, the length of sales cycle is going to increase. So a couple of quick final thoughts, then we'll get our panel discussion. First up, it's definitely clear that most digital health companies believe that COVID was very positive for both the market and for their own future. And most of them think that this is going to translate into greater usage of their products and greater revenue. And I think that was very evident from the survey. Do want to point out that most of them are going to see longer than anticipated sales cycles and probably will end up struggling to surmount them. And it's just worth remembering that in the sort of crazy time we are now with, cryptocurrencies and Dogecoin and Elon Musk on Saturday Night Live, only a small minority of current digital health companies are going to get to those huge funding rounds and go there, have that sort of rocket ship moonshot exit. So with that, I'm going to stop here, and we're going to have for the balance of the hour, we're going to have a quick panel discussion with two digital health CEOs, Mudit Garg from Cuventus, Helena Plater-Zyberk from Supportive, Ryan Johnson, an attorney at Frederickson and Byron, and Sunny Kumar, an investor at GSL Ventures. So Elizabeth, if you invite them to take their place, I will stop sharing. We'll bring everybody up. All right. Mudit, can you turn your camera on? And we'll start the chat. So let's start with
Matthew. I think I'm disallowed on turning camera on by host.
We will ask Elizabeth to fix that, but we can hear you, so the least we can.
Fantastic.
Hear you. But let me start with Helena and you, Mudit. Now we see you. So Helena, Supportive is a pretty young digital health company. You are in the peer-to-peer mental health support space. Mental health has got a ton of those big checks being written. Mudit, you're a bit further along. You've raised around our media. I think it's around 45 million, something in that order that you've raised, but you sell to hospitals primarily. So I'd love you both just to comment on what has been your experience in the last year. Both your companies were growing fast anyway when you got to the start of COVID. But I'll start with you, Helena. What's your experience been in the last year, and does it sort of match with what we said here?
I think it has. I think it's reflected a lot of the data that you shared today. So pre-COVID, in the mental health space, we were growing about 15% month over month leading into last March. And then we just saw explosive growth, the kind that's, entrepreneurs sort of dream of. You hang on for dear life and see where it takes you. That led us into an interesting position where we've been able to grow. We're now up at about 2.5 million covered lives, 600,000 users without raising VC financing. So in some ways, we've had extraordinary benefit from the increased sort of, behavioral health concerns in the market. I think I'll let Quintus chime in, and then I'd love to come back to sales cycles and things like that we're seeing, because there are some, insights that we've got in that data too.
Sure. Mudit?
Yeah, I think, Matt, high level, absolutely yes. I think the optimism is shared across the board, largely because I think in every aspect of care delivery, there's been a recognition at every level. Normally people looking outside into healthcare are always puzzled by why healthcare works the way it works. But I think we've gotten a year worth of being exposed to the painful way healthcare is delivered, and you have to navigate through it. And I think that's increased the appetite quite a bit across the board to say, we need to find a different way of running it, different way of delivering it, different way of helping people navigate it. So I think the optimism is shared, and there's a belief across many constituents, a much more deeper seated belief among many constituents that modernization has to happen. And of course, naturally, digital health plays a pretty big part in it. I think we've seen a similar thing. I'd say selling to hospitals directly, I would say walking into March, April, the range of uncertainty, the cone of range of uncertainty was very, very wide. Like, I knew that health systems were kind of hatcheting down and didn't know what the next day's problem is going to be. One day it was masks, the next day it was, swabs for doing testing, and it was hard to know how we could best help. I think for us, we probably for the first 2 or 3 months just built products that actually were not revenue generating products, but were helpful to the ecosystem. We built some COVID planning tools and things. And we found that doing that activity kept us relevant in the ecosystem. And then in Q3, Q4, we saw, much faster than ever before growth sort of happening. And largely speaking, I would say that what I found is that anywhere there were either existing conversations or existing evaluation taking place, the sales cycles were shorter for us. Where it was harder was to get net new conversations started in an environment where every 2 weeks there was a new problem starting up and people's attention and spans were not as high.
Yeah, I'd add to that. So 2 things. One is Cuventus won one of the catalysts that helped people know Rob Wood Johnson funded challenges for new tools for the health system to deal with COVID. very cool thing, which I think is one of the non-revenue creating tools, but very useful for your customers. And probably, I hope that helped you get, cement your value in that. And then, obviously, hospitals saw a range of problems. And my little anecdote is that one of my buddies, who is a venture capitalist working in a big New York system, found himself in charge of sourcing PPE from Hong Kong, China, and God knows where, and is now embroiled in an FBI case about money that was sent from New York State to China that never came back. So a lot of people doing things they weren't expecting to do in the hospital world, and frankly, what hospitals and their frontline staff did in the last 12 months, has been remarkable.
Incredible. Right.
Helena, say a bit more about that sales cycle issue. You're selling more to employers and plans, but tell us a bit more about what you've been finding.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it'd be interesting to look at your data separated by sort of times in the range of collection data, because if you look back at people that may have answered the survey in November and December, I mean, we had a contested election, COVID was nowhere near under control, there was a lot of urgency and panic buying, whereas, data that may have come in March is a much more stable and settled environment. So I would actually say that sales cycles now are slowing down, because a lot of organizations are pulling up from the chaos and saying, let's reevaluate purchase decisions that we've made in the past year. Does it still make sense? What strategically do we need in this post-COVID era? Which is really going to benefit the incumbents, because people continuously underestimate how relationship-based healthcare sales are. And so if you have that opportunity to get in front of the decision makers while the strategic reevaluation is happening, you're going to be in a much better position than those early stage companies that are getting shut out of those discussions now.
Excellent. No, a solid point. Ryan, Sunny, you guys are kind of on the fun end, where you're going to actually have to start these horrible, these terrible startups and go through the pain and suffering that Mudit and Helena have to go through. And you just get to write checks, or have them, in your case, Ryan, write you checks. So given what you saw, and we didn't have a lot of investors in this survey, Sunny. It wasn't aimed at that. We didn't specifically go after lawyers, Ryan. We given what we saw the data. What's your sense about how much it resonates with what you've seen from your vantage point in the last year? Sunny, why don't you go first, and then we'll go to Ryan.
Sure. So I can provide a couple of comments. One, first of all, fantastic survey, and 100% agree with the macro assessment that, as awful as COVID was for the digital health ecosystem, this has been a massive accelerant and provided significant tailwinds to the whole industry. And I think you saw that consistently throughout your survey. I'll comment on two areas that were particularly relevant to the investor side of it. One was the shift in attention, and then secondarily, the dollars and how they're being deployed in digital health has changed meaningfully. Long story short, you are seeing more and more dollars going towards those actively scaling digital health companies, and actually as a portion, relatively fewer dollars going to those seed, pre-seed, really early stage companies. I'll comment on just a couple of reasons why. One, which you hit on, which was that some of these funds are just reserving capital to make sure they can back their own companies. Honestly, that was very true in the early part of the year when COVID was very uncertain. We've seen that become much less of a risk factor as the year has progressed, and certainly into 2021. But there are a couple of things that are persistent. One is that you're seeing larger funds, especially among established funds, which pushes them to deploy larger checks, which kind of cuts out some of those earlier seed deals and pushes them more towards A's, B's, C's, et cetera. Two, and I think this was commented somewhere as well, is you're seeing a flood of new investors enter this space, which is fantastic for the whole industry. But generally speaking, many of these investors don't have deep health tech or digital health experience. And as a result, they're almost always going to be biased towards companies that already have some degree of product market fit, because that they can more easily explain to their partnership. And lastly, and this is critical, this came up in your data as well, is that the return profile versus valuation risk is very different for an early stage company versus one that's actively scaling. And as you saw, the traction is picking up significantly across those that are early scale or active scale, maybe a little bit less so for those that are early on, but the risk profile, unfortunately, is still the same, kind of across the spectrum. So you're seeing a preference for investors to go into companies that have already de-risked some of those initial things and are seeing a lot of the benefit from the increased rate of adoption due to COVID. The last thing I'll comment on is I was surprised that none of your investors said that they've increased their decision-making time. Certainly on our end, this has actually been a requirement, particularly for those actively scaling companies. We're seeing so much more activity and interest in these companies that you have to move quickly to be competitive. And even more, we're seeing companies get preempted. So before they're even considering going out for a financing deal, investors are coming to them with offers to fund them. So it's creating some unique dynamics in the ecosystem overall.
Yeah, I suspect Tiger Global didn't answer the survey. That's
right. That's right.
Ryan, what have you seen in terms of the issues you're seeing with company formation and companies you're advising both on the digital health side and on the client side?
Yeah, sure. First of all, great presentation, and the survey data is consistent with what I'm seeing with my client base over the past year. Lots of optimism, lots of activity. And as all of you have said, I mean, COVID, it was a tragedy in many ways, but for the digital health world, it really helped accelerate the adoption of digital health in the healthcare marketplace. So one thing that was not surprising in retrospect was how quickly the government, both state and federal governments, payers moved to really liberalize rules, waive rules to make it easier for digital health companies to provide healthcare services and provide reimbursement for those services, and especially in telemedicine. Those were, that was great, fuel for the fire of digital health, especially in the telemedicine space. And, I think that, the success of telemedicine and other digital health tools during this past year, that I think will result in increasing liberalization of the rules, the regulatory landscape, to make it easier for digital health companies to launch and to succeed. One slide from your presentation that talked about digital health companies and their familiarity with sort of the regulatory landscape did resonate. A number of my clients are well aware of the issues. They're very sophisticated, but there is a significant number, startups who don't have necessarily the regulatory expertise or know-how to sometimes avoid making costly mistakes at the beginning. It's important for them, I think, to consult with the regulatory experts to make sure that when they're putting their business plan together, what they're cobbling together will work, given the very complex regulatory landscape in which digital healthcare companies operate. That can be in privacy, security. It can deal with some of the federal and state, self-referral or anti-kickback prohibitions that deal with how you market your services, how you can incentivize referral sources or purchasers. But digital health companies, the future is bright, but it does pay to talk to consultants, talk to lawyers, talk to the experts to help you put all pieces of the puzzle together, including the regulatory and legal side of the plan.
Yeah, I think very few small companies make those regulatory hires, other than my buddy Devin McGraw over at Citizen. Was a very early hire and a very sophisticated privacy lawyer for that company. You'll tend to see this stuff come a bit later, but yes, it's important. And I was just struck by the amount of the relative small number of people who've gone all the way through security, high trust, given the frequent ransomware attacks and the heightened sensitivity around that. Right. We have just a couple of minutes left in the panel discussion, but I wanted to ask both Mudit, Helena, and perhaps Sunny this. So Shahid Shah is on the case, and he, like me, runs conferences in his one of his many day jobs. And he asked this question, which is a lot of early stage digital health companies go to conferences. I used to run one, as you know, like to fill the bucket with leads, to meet people, to do networking, especially on that sort of lead generation. Did you find that the funnel started to empty because there were no physical conferences? Did it make any difference? Did you pick it up somewhere else, or was it just a place to go drinking and never a place to meet clients in the first place?
I consider myself a stalker extraordinaire. I think that's how I met you, Matthew, back in the day. Luckily, I think the virtual conference world has really evolved in the past year, and a lot of the networking opportunities, kind of the speed dating opportunities through the conferences that exist now, have been extremely beneficial. I've been able to still connect with folks virtually, have those 2-3 minute need exchanges, and then do follow-up. So I'm actually a big fan of the virtual conference opportunity, and I hope that we continue sort of in a hybrid format going forward.
And we'll stay tuned, because Jester Master and I may have a small announcement about that coming up shortly. Mudit, how did you do with the lead generation?
Yeah, no, we certainly felt that for the first probably 3 to 6 months of the pandemic, the early stage lead generation was early stage of the pipeline, lead generation was much lower. We saw a lot more actually happen through the tools that we built and staying engaged and in the conversation with health systems that were not actively conversing with you before was definitely harder in that time frame. And I think people, where it was strategic, there was a much faster evaluation and a much faster progression through the sales cycle. But where that case had not been established, it was much harder. We've seen now, I think since November, December, a much more rapid pace. So even in the last 3 months, the early stages of the pipeline have grown like 60% in the last 3 months. So like we're seeing a lot of that switch back. It's hard for me to say how much of that was purely lack of events driven versus just the reality that, as you were describing, many of the people were doing 2 or 3 day jobs as they were trying to figure things out. So it was fits and starts of it for a long time last year. But we certainly saw that affect the lead generation in the beginning quite a bit.
All right, and we'll end with the money guy. Sunny, a real quick note. We're in this crazy time. Elon Musk or something like that said, and Dogecoin can go up and down, and we're seeing Amazon come in to the market, and Teladoc stock fall rather more for those who's holding it, rather more be like, where is your? But there's all this money floating around the world. Interest rates are still very low. Where's your sense about the sort of the fundraising for the VCs ready to spend into digital health? How long do you think this moment will continue to last, or do you think we're in one of these massive fundamental realignments and it's going to go on for a long time? Where do you sense that we are in that kind of overall moment?
It's a fantastic question. Obviously a little bit biased, but GSR is incredibly bullish on the digital health revolution really continuing full steam ahead. I'll caveat that, of course, there's always going to be a risk of some corrections here. Valuations may adjust, the amount of dollars may slightly change from year to year, but the direction that we're going in, it has so much momentum behind it. There's so much inefficiency in healthcare. There's so much need in healthcare in the US, but also globally, that our position at GSR Ventures is that we are going to see massive, massive opportunity in the digital health landscape, literally in the $1 trillion plus revenue opportunity in the US, globally, that suggests that can support many, many, many startups. So for any of you in the audience that are excited and looking at joining a startup or starting a startup of your own, please do feel very excited about the environment. I don't think I could imagine a better time to go after this opportunity than today.
Fantastic. Really appreciate Mudit, Ryan, Sunny, and Helena coming on and chatting about this. And we are now at the point where we are ready to say goodbye and thank you. So the last thing we do before we go is that, as I said, 2 people are going to win free advertising on the healthcare blog. Elizabeth, I'm going to ask for some numbers. So as I see Sunny and Ryan on my screen, I will ask them both for a random number between what's our top number? 1 and
335. All
right. Please find give us a number between 1 and 335. First you, Sunny.
I'll go 217.
217. And Ryan?
I'll go 74.
74. Can you tell us who won, Elizabeth?
Yep, that is Radha Sumariva and
from which company?
From ZippyCare, I believe. Let me see.
ZippyCare wins? Oh my God, that's one of the companies I advise. That's like really embarrassing. Okay, and the next one?
And then Paul from Patient First Studio. I don't have a last name.
Those 2 will get that, and everybody who's take part of the survey will get a more detailed version of the results. And the results are going to be available on the healthcare blog, on the catalyst.health blog, and elsewhere shortly. And with that, I want to thank everybody who attended the survey. Sorry, attended the webinar. The survey here. I want to thank Ryan Johnson, Helena Plater-Zyberk, Mudit Garg, and Sunny Kumar for coming on our panel. I want to thank our colleagues at Wipfli, particularly Girish and Paul and their team. And with that, any questions? There's a lot more data in this survey. We'll be dribbling some more of it out. But any questions, any comments, please get in touch with us at Catalyst at Health 2.0. You can tweet us at Catalyst _Health H2O, or you can contact with me, Matthew at catalyst.health, or Elizabeth at catalyst.health, or just, I believe, innovate@catalyst.health is our overall email, or you can find us anywhere online. And with that, I want to thank everyone for coming, everyone for attending, and hope you enjoyed seeing this survey data, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. And you never know, hopefully Girish and Paul, we may get to do this again next year if we have more interest.